All right, welcome back to Simplified Teaching. Today we're talking about maybe the most valuable and, let's be honest, the most wasted part of your entire lesson, those final 5 minutes.
I mean, just think about it for a second. The bell's about to ring, you can hear the backpack zipping up, and you're just trying to shout reminders over the noise. It really feels like a lost cause, right? But what if the research actually shows that this is the exact moment you can cement the day's learning?
You know, this isn't just a hunch. The educational researcher James Lang, he calls this a golden moment. It's this strategic window where you can tap into a little quirk of our brains. See, we're naturally wired to remember things better from the very end of a learning experience. So the real question is, how do we actually use it? To figure that out, we're going to go way beyond just anecdotes and get right into the peer-reviewed evidence. And we've dug up 3 really interesting, recent studies that honestly offer some competing but super valuable perspectives on what really works when that clock is ticking down. So here's our game plan. We're going to kick things off with the big one, the retrieval practice revolution. Then we'll throw a wrench in the works with something called the synthesis complication. After that, we'll look at a modern tech angle with a digital feedback loop. And then, this is the fun part, we're going to put them all head-to-head in the data war. Finally, we'll boil it all down into our key takeaways and give you a practical action plan you can literally use this week. Okay, let's start with the undisputed champ of memory research, retrieval practice. The whole idea here is pretty simple, but powerful. The act of pulling information out of your brain is a way better learning tool than just cramming it in over and over again. So back in 2021, Agarwal and his team dropped this huge systematic review. They looked at 50 different experiments from actual classrooms, and the finding was crystal clear. Retrieval practice works. It just flat out works. Now, there is a catch. You'll see it in the limitation row there. The vast majority of this research comes from what researchers call weird countries. That's Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. So we do have to be a little careful about saying this works for everyone, everywhere. But still, for its sheer weight of evidence, we're giving this an impact score of 5 out of 5. In this quote right here, it just nails it. A quick, low-stakes quiz at the end of class gives you a much better bang for your buck for long-term memory than just telling students to review their notes. It's that mental effort of recalling the information that's the secret sauce. But hang on, is it really that simple? Is a little quiz always the best way to spend those last 5 minutes? Let's bring in our next study, because this one complicates the picture. It asks a totally different question. What if your goal isn't just remembering facts, but actually understanding deep, complex ideas? Okay, so check this out. This is a master's thesis by Adrian Villarreal, and it looks at student-led synthesis in middle school math. Now, during a really tough unit, all the students' test scores dipped a bit. But, and this is the key, the students who did these synthesis activities at the end of class, their scores declined less. Villarreal calls this protective cognitive scaffolding. It's like it built a little shield around their understanding. And beyond the test scores, teachers saw these huge jumps in how students talked about math and how they thought about their own thinking. The study was short, which is a limitation, but for its focus on complex learning, this absolutely earns a 4 out of 5. And what this really tells us is that if the only tool we use to measure learning is a multiple-choice test, we might be missing the most important growth of all. Synthesis builds those critical skills like discourse and metacognition. You know, the stuff that's hard to put a number on, but is kind of the whole point of school. So we've got retrieval for remembering facts and synthesis for making sense of big ideas. Our third study throws another angle into the mix. What if the real purpose of those final 5 minutes is communication? A way to create a feedback loop between you and your students, powered by a little bit of tech. This was a pilot study by Sanchez, Martin, Moreno, and their team, and they used digital exit tickets in a university course. The results were pretty striking. Almost 90% of the students felt positive about them. They said it helped them reflect on what they learned, and, crucially, it gave the instructor a super quick snapshot of what was still confusing. Now, the big limitation here is that this is all about student perception, not a direct measure of memory, and the sample size was pretty small. So for impact, it gets a 3 out of 5, but it points to a really vital third purpose for ending your lesson strong. And this quote really gets to the core of it. The real value of that digital exit ticket wasn't necessarily making students memorize more facts. It was about opening up a channel of communication. It's about creating this real-time, responsive feedback loop so that you, the teacher, can be more agile and student-centered. Okay, so there you have it. 3 powerful but pretty different ideas on the table. So now it is time for the main event,
The data war. This is where we slam the research together and see where the sparks fly, because that's where the deepest insights are hiding.
So let's put these studies right next to each other. On the left, look at what they all agree on. The final 5 minutes? Absolutely critical, and it has to be about active student thinking. But now, look at the right side. This is where it gets interesting. They diverge on the goal of that time. Is it about factual recall, like Agarwal says? Or metacognitive growth, like Villarreal argues? Or is it all about that formative feedback loop that Sanchez and their team are focused on? You see, they're all recommending a different best method because they're not even playing the same game. They're defining success in completely different ways.
So why the big difference? Well, it all comes down to their methods. Agarwal's review is massive and broad, which gives us a great general principle. But Villarreal's study is a deep dive into a really specific, tricky context, which uncovers nuances that a big review might just smooth over. And the Sanchez study? It's a pilot. It was designed to explore potential and perception, not to prove anything about long-term memory. So they're not actually contradicting each other. It's more like they're all using different camera lenses to look at different parts of the same, really complex picture.
Okay. So what in the world does all this mean for us when we walk into our classroom on Monday morning? Let's boil this whole data war down into a clear, unified verdict.
Takeaway number 1, and it's a big one. Retrieval is for recall. Look, if your lesson was about locking in facts, we're talking vocabulary words, historical dates, chemical formulas, then a quick, low-stakes quiz is the most powerful, evidence-backed tool in your entire toolkit, period.
And that brings us to takeaway number 2. Synthesis is for sense-making. If you want students to grapple with the why behind something or to see the connections between big ideas, a simple quiz just isn't going to cut it. That's where student-led synthesis comes in. It's the tool you use to build that deeper understanding and, just as importantly, to help them learn how to learn. And finally, takeaway number 3. Feedback closes the loop. Whatever you choose to do at the end of your lesson, that output, the quiz results, the reflections, that's not the end. That is priceless data. It's your most immediate look into your students' brains, and it tells you exactly how to adjust your plan for tomorrow. Theory is fantastic, but we're all about practice here. So let's turn all of this into a super clear 3-step action plan you can use to totally transform the last 5 minutes of your class this week.
All right, here we go. Step 1, match the method to the goal. Simple. Was it a fact-heavy day? End with a 3-question quiz. Was it about big, complex ideas? Use a synthesis activity like the 3 W's. It's so easy. You just have students quickly jot down or discuss, what did we learn? So what? Why does it matter? And now what? Where do we go from here? It's an incredible sense-making tool. Okay, step 2, and this one is so important. Make it student-led. Your job is to be a facilitator, not a summarizer. Your voice should be the quietest one in the room as you shift that cognitive load onto them. And finally, step 3, analyze the output. Whatever they give you, the quiz scores, the exit tickets, that's gold. That's your first data point for planning tomorrow's lesson.
So here's the bottom line. The end of your class is not for winding down. It's for locking in. It is the single most strategic moment you have to turn what you taught today into knowledge that your students will carry with them tomorrow, and for a long, long time after that.
Hey, if you got value out of this breakdown, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to Simplified Teaching so you don't miss our next research-driven analysis. It drops next week. And hey, if you want to support our work, all the relevant resources and links are down in the description. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next week.